Welcome to The Pure Perspective, the podcast where we explore the many pathways to recovery. I'm your host, Kyle Van Blerkum, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. At The Pure Perspective, we're on a mission to shine light onto the journey of healing, resilience, and hope. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories of individuals who have faced substance use and mental health challenges head-on, along with insights from trained professionals and family members offering unwavering support. Whether you're on your own path to recovery or seeking to understand the struggles and triumphs of others, you're in the right place. This podcast is a safe space for inspiration, connection, and growth. Get ready for candid conversations, heartfelt stories, and valuable insights right here on The Pure Perspective.
So I have Katy Meline here. She's going to share a little bit about her story and some work that she's doing now. I'll let you kind of talk about, your childhood and events leading up until now.
Yeah. So growing up, my childhood, it was pretty normal. I grew up in a good family. My mom has worked in the courthouse for over 30 years, and my dad was a state union worker.
Okay.
So yeah, my family raised me right with good values and morals, and we were a really good, cohesive family. When I was 14 years old, I was sexually assaulted, and that radically changed all the relationships in my family. The relationship between my dad and I became estranged, basically. And my parents didn't really know how to handle the situation. So I guess the dynamic was don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So we would always act like everything was just fine in our family. We wouldn't really talk through things that had happened, and we wouldn't process feelings openly. We would just always act like everything was okay. So yeah, that was a huge thing that happened in my life, and everything changed. After that, I started hanging out with different friends. Always looking for the rebel guy to date or whatever. So when I was 17, I got into a relationship with a much older man. He was 30. And I kind of just up and left with him. I had plans on going to college to become a probation officer. And at this point, I was only drinking and using pills, namely opiates. So yeah, I ended up leaving with him, not going to college, saying screw everything, and moved in with him, and his 4 kids, ended up taking care of them. And he sold crack cocaine. So then I started doing that with him, selling drugs. And I stopped using pills at that point. It wasn't something that he approved of. You could only sell drugs, but you can't use drugs. And in the beginning, it was kind of difficult for me to just stop using painkillers. I was most likely addicted.
Right.
So then that turned into an abuse situation where he was abusing me, and then when he would find out that I was using, then it would just get increasingly worse. When I was 18, I got pregnant. And then about 8 months after that, we had gotten set up and for selling crack cocaine. And in my young mind, I wanted to prove my love to him, and decided rather quickly when we got arrested that I was going to take the blame and say that the drugs were mine, because then this guy would love me and know that I was loyal or whatever. Years later, I realized that he had brainwashed me and conditioned me into that type of thinking and mentality, just through conversations or how he would treat women, that they're property, or the purpose of having a woman around is so that they would hold the drugs. You know, just like all the conversations and being around that just kind of conditioned me and brainwashed me. And like how he would treat those women as if they were superior, but like wouldn't really think that about them, but he would make them feel that way.
Right.
And so then in my mind, 18 years old, I was like, well, I want him to like think of me like that or treat me like that or whatever it was. So yeah, so I ended up telling the task force that the drugs were mine, they weren't his. So he ended up getting out of jail, and then came and bailed me out. I was charged with first-degree conspiracy and second-degree sales. And then I ended up having my daughter shortly after that. And like the abuse just continued to get worse and worse and worse. So that court case lasted like about 2 years, and I wasn't really necessarily using anymore during these years just because it would only contribute to the abuse. Like it would make the abuse worse. So at this point, I'm taking care of 5 kids, my daughter and his 4 children. I end up getting pregnant again. And then I had my son, and that's when the court case for selling the cocaine was finished, and I ended up taking a plea for third-degree sales. Got put on probation for 5 years. Not realizing like that sales charge would play into like a lot of my other criminal charges that I would get over the years. After I had my son, I tested positive for oxycodone, and I ended up removing my children from my care. I went to Hazelden in Center City, and I did the long-term program there. It was like 100 days or something. And it was super beneficial.
Yeah.
Like, I started working through some of the things that I kept the relationship stuff a secret, like the abuse and all that. Again, like brainwashed.
Yeah. Like,
no, we can't talk about this. And that's the number one thing that's like playing into my use of drugs or whatever. After that, I was on Suboxone for like a year and a half, but remained sober for like 4 years, okay? And got my kids back rather quickly. But still, like, the abuse continued to get worse and worse and worse.
Right.
In 2016, I ended up finally leaving him, their dad. And also at that time, like, I had started abusing Xanax. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and they prescribed me Xanax, like a really high dose of Xanax. So,
makes sense.
yeah, sure. Just make her black out. Everything will be fine. So yeah, and so I was like, okay, well, either I'm going to overdose on this stupid medication or he's going to end up killing me. Either way, whatever, I don't care. Like, you know, things just didn't matter. So I ended up going to a short-term treatment called Project Turnabout in Granite Falls, Minnesota.
Yep.
Which is where I'm originally from. And my kids stayed with their dad while I did this short-term program. Completed that, and once again was in the mentality, like, I'm sober now, I can, you know, be normal and do all these whatever.
I'm cured.
Yeah, I'm cured. I moved back in with my parents. My kids stayed with their dad until I could get my own place or whatever. And I ended up hanging out with, like, old friends from high school, and they were all druggies at this point, like, all addicted to meth and whatever. But, like, those were the only people that I knew. Like, those were my people in high school.
Right.
And one of my friends ended up overdosing and dying in front of me. And the day after that, I tried meth and heroin for the first time. And that, like, took over my life very quickly. I ended up signing custody of my kids over to their dad. I also had some looming legal charges due to that overdose. So we just decided, like, the best thing to would be for me to sign custody over. So the state didn't get involved. So yeah, I did that. And then at the end of 2017. I ended up getting in trouble with some friends that were, doing meth and breaking into houses, and ended up going to prison for 28 months for a burglary. While in prison, like, I did really great things, like started doing schooling again, was in the dog therapy program, was a lead in textiles, so, but like when you're in prison, you don't deal with any of your mental health stuff.
Right.
Like they don't have counseling or anything. So again, wasn't dealing with like any of the trauma that I had been through, like the years of abuse or the sexual assault that happened all the way back when I was 14. Like things just were not dealt with. So when I was released from prison, like still had a degree of normalcy, I guess, just because of the length of time that I was sober. So I had a full-time job and was continuing school, but then another traumatic event happened. A friend of mine ended up dying, so then the only way that I knew how to cope was to get high, so that's what happened. Started selling drugs. By March of 2020, it was literally like a couple weeks after I started getting high and selling drugs again. And I ended up getting in trouble in Minnesota, and was charged with first-degree sales, and went to jail, bailed out, and then a few months later got in trouble in Wisconsin for possession with intent and firearms. Was not bailing out for that.
Yeah.
It was like a $15,000 cash bond, and I had already, spent the money that I had saved for all my drug dealing on my other bail, so I was like, okay, well, I'm screwed now. And ended up sitting in Polk County Jail for 9 months. Tried to do the whole applying to treatment thing, and the judge like laughed at me. He was like, you're not going anywhere. So after like 9 months, I ended up firing my public defender because he came in and he was like, okay, well, they just want you to testify against the people that you were with, and then, you'll do minimal jail time and you'll be out. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So, I ended up firing him that day. I was like, well, what if I want a different attorney? And he was like, well, that's your decision. So we went to court. I fired him, and then I had to wait to get another public defender in the state of Wisconsin during COVID. This is like 2020, like COVID is really crazy. And they were like, I would like call these people and they were like, we can't tell you anything. We don't know when you're going to get a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, great. Just send me to prison. So I ended up getting a different attorney. She was actually from St. Paul because my co-defendants and I couldn't have attorneys from the same county or whatever, conflict of interest. And then at one of my hearings, my bail reduction hearing, like I was trying to get it lowered to $5,000 so I could bail out and then, continue doing the same stuff. And the judge was like, I'm not lowering your bail, but I had to stand in judge that day. And he was like, well, you have this stuff about treatment. And so they ended up allowing me to go to the Adult and Teen Challenge program, located in La Crosse. Like, I still don't really know or understand, like, how I ended up going to that specific center. Like, I ended up getting an AODA assessment the beginning of my time in Polk County trying to go to treatment. But I didn't really know where I was going to go to treatment. I just know that I wanted to go. They weren't going to let me go to Minnesota, and then they said there was one in Wisconsin, but I didn't even know where it was. And so that day in court, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to give you a signature bond and you can go to the Adult and Teen Challenge program.
Wow.
And the lady that, the program coordinator, whatever, from the Adult and Teen Challenge program, they were already on their way to Polk County, like before, like the hearing even began. It's like 2.5, 3 hour drive.
Wow.
Because that was in La Crosse. So it was like, they came there in good faith thinking that I was going to get released. So they were there, like, as soon as I was done with court, and I was like, what in the world? Like, I didn't understand it, so I'm paranoid thinking the feds are going to arrest me when I get out. Like, there's no way they're just going to let me out of jail. I have all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got out of jail. I went to the program in La Crosse. And I was there for like 3 months. Like when I walked in the doors, it was very weird because everybody was really nice. Like when you come from selling drugs and being around people in a crazy lifestyle. Yeah, or jail. And then all of a sudden, like, people want to give you a hug and I love you. It's like, what is wrong with you people? Do not touch me. You guys are up to something. What are you up to? It's like a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
And I think it even like made me angry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But slowly, like, it started to soften me because they were always like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't like because they wanted something or, and they didn't really push me to like have in-depth conversations or like if anybody was to ask about my family or anything like that, it's like I'm shutting that down right away. I'm not telling you anything like that.
Right.
And why would you want to know that?
What's your motivation?
Yeah,
here?
you gotta have some.
What's your angle?
Yeah, ulterior motive.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So I started doing like these packets on receiving God's love. So I grew up in a Lutheran church, so I had this idea of who God was, but I don't like have any memories of learning about Jesus necessarily or having a relationship with him. Mm-hmm. So whether it was my distortion or whatever, I just thought that God was up there and he will punish you for things. And I understood that he either loves you or he doesn't. And I just figured he doesn't care about me. So that's why my life is the way that it is. So I started doing those packets and the homework and whatever, and like it started to change me and soften me along with the people's character at the center I was at, like through and through, like these people were the same, like the staff, obviously not the clients, but like they would act the same around their kids that they would around us, or outside of like the center when we would do outings, like they were just the same. And I didn't understand that because, like, in the life that I lived, I'm one way when I'm around this person, and I'm another way when I'm around that person. I'm a different way when I'm around my parents. So I thought that was very interesting. And so I started to, like, trust people because of that. 3 months into my program, I had to go back to Minnesota to stand trial for my case over there, and I had a jury trial and was found guilty for first-degree sales. So I went to jail that day, and I was looking at a 115-month mandatory minimum. And actually, I was like kind of excited because my relationship with my kids up to that point was they stayed with their dad. They were kind of used as a means of control. Like if I wouldn't come over to see all of them together, or if I didn't do whatever he wanted, then I just wouldn't get to see my kids. And also, like, because I was using drugs, I just determined that it was better for me to stay away. So, yeah, our relationship we didn't really have one. So, me knowing that I was going to Shakopee, I was literally, like, to the women's prison there, I was like, okay, well, I'll literally be, like, right down the road from my kids. They'll be able to come see me all the time. Like, thinking that's okay for my kids to come and visit me in prison for the next 10 years. What a weirdo. Gosh. So, and I knew that I would be eligible for boot camp. So I'm in jail, awaiting sentencing, like running on the treadmill every day, but still like had this enormous peace that like now I know that it was the Lord. So like taking what I used when I was in the program, the 3 months I was in the program at Teen Challenge, and like still applying that to my everyday life, like reading the Word, staying in contact with all the people that had played a huge part in my life. Like when I was in Polk County Jail, there was this woman that would come meet with me faithfully for Bible study at 9 a.m. And so she was a really big part of my life at that point. So yeah, staying in touch with those people. And because that's like a huge part of being in recovery, like who you talk to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like that was one of my main problems, like my decisions on who I hung out with, like that.
Right.
Yeah, that greatly affected my life. So yeah, a few months later I had my sentencing, and I knew that like the directors from the Adult and Teen Challenge program, that they would show up to my sentencing. And when I walked up to the courtroom though, like they brought everybody from the whole facility. So I don't know, it was like 12 plus people. So it was all the clients. It was okay, it's a small facility. We only
The whole facility.
yeah. I think we had 8 or 9 clients at the time.
Okay.
And then all the staff. So I like walk up there and they're all up there, and I was like happy, but I was also sad. Like, no, you guys are gonna watch me get sent to prison for 10 years.
Yeah.
This is terrible. Why'd you drive 5 hours? And like my attorney had no hope. Like I have such a bad record. I've been arrested over, I don't even know, like 30 times, 6-time felon, you know, like
right.
I'm going to prison. Yeah, and he just wasn't very encouraging. He's like, don't get your hopes up, because we filed for a downward departure. And because I've been to prison before, it was the same judge that sent me to prison the first time. So I'm just like, whatever. And my mom worked for him for over 30 years, you know, in the same courthouse, because my mom works at the courthouse.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is not going to go good. Anyways, during the court hearing, so some of the staff testified on my behalf, like the change that they had seen in me. And it's kind of cool, like hearing how other people see how you've changed, because I think that we don't really realize how we change ourselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But hearing somebody else's perception, then it's kind of like, are they talking about me? No, they can't be talking about me. That's how I've changed. Wow.
Yeah.
And then the judge at the end, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to tell you my decision, and then I'm going to tell you why. I was like, oh, shoot, here we go. Like, he's going to say that I'm going to prison. And he's like, I'm going to grant your downward departure. And everybody in the courtroom was like, and my attorney was like, shushing everybody in the courtroom. Like, everybody's getting all loud. Like, and I blacked out. It was over. I'm like, this is not happening. So I just checked out completely.
Yeah.
But, like, the most important thing that he said to me when he gave his reason why, he was like, you have changed. And, like, I still hold on to that now. Like, for a judge to say that, somebody who's familiar with your record and has sent you to prison before, to, like, see the change in you, that was huge for me. So I had to sit in jail for a little while longer and await to get an interstate compact for my probation to be transferred to Wisconsin, because he sentenced me back to complete the program, the 1-year program at Adult and Teen Challenge in La Crosse. And then I had put the 10 years over my head, and then probation for 5 years. I've never completed like probation successfully, so I'm like, oh shoot, you know. So I go back to Wisconsin. I think I was in jail for like another month. And then I go back to the program, and I completed it. I graduated June of 2022. And then I was hired as a recovery coach at the center there. And then I had my sentencing for Wisconsin at the end of that summer. And like going into it, like I was prepared. Before I went to court, you know, I was like, had my white t-shirts and underwear, you know, packed with me, because in Polk County you can bring your own underclothes. I knew I was going to jail, but everybody else was really hopeful that the same thing was going to happen that happened for my Minnesota case. And I'm like, there's no frickin' way that I'm not going to get sent away for a long time for both of these cases. So again, like, we brought everybody from the program, and people testified about the changes in me and whatever. And the prosecutor was asking for 5 to 7 years, and they're just really harsh in Wisconsin. They don't care like if you're rehabilitated or whatever it is. Like, they still want you to serve time because drugs is viewed as like, in Minnesota they take more of a standpoint that, okay, you need help. In Wisconsin, if you sell drugs, you're the problem. You're why our communities are the way that they are. We want to send you away.
Even though you're mostly just supporting your own habit.
Yeah. So at one point the judge was like, there was guns found and all these drugs. Just think of all the blood that was shed. And I'm like, holy, we didn't kill anybody. Jeez. So the prosecutor wanted 5 to 7 years, but when we walked into the courtroom, like, he spoke first, and we filled the courtroom, so he's like, Your Honor, after like seeing all the support that Ms. O'Connor has here today and knowing that she completed this program successfully, I'm going to ask for a stayed and imposed sentence. I wanted to send her to prison today, and then his mind just like changed in front of us. It was really cool. So I'm like, there's no way that I'm not going to prison again, But that was a good way to start the hearing, because then I was encouraged. Like, wow, I'm not going to prison in Wisconsin either. This is so crazy. And I remember thinking in my mind, like, God, what are you doing with my life?
Yeah.
Like, why are you like bringing me through these situations? Why am I not having any great consequences? So like I had felt like there was a calling on, there was a calling on my life since I've been sober and in recovery and whatever. But it's different when you're facing like long-term prison.
Yeah.
And like potentially the majority of the rest of your life. And then it changes. Like, I planned to go to prison. That was my plan. That was the only plan there was. There was nothing else. And when that all of a sudden changes, it's like, what is going on?
Right.
So then the end of the hearing, it's the judge's turn to speak, and he read my whole record in the courtroom. I'm saying like every driving ticket, every theft charge, the whole thing. And before every, more significant charge, he was like, I cannot ignore. And I was like, oh shoot, this is not going well. And then at the end, he was like, so I'm sentencing you to, I don't know what's different in Wisconsin, 10 years of ES, so like extended supervision. And then he's like, 5 years in prison. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking in my mind, like, yeah, I could do 5 years. That ain't no big deal. And then he was like, but that was like if I get revoked or whatever. And he's like, I'm sentencing you to 1 year in jail. And I was more encouraged with the 5 years in prison.
Right.
Because I looked at my attorney, I was like, I have to do 1 year in Polk County jail? No. I was like, this is terrible. And so then I was like, can you ask if I can do it in La Crosse County jail? They have a nice jail, they have a nice gym. Polk County has nothing. You get a little small TV, you can do a little workout tape, that's about it. Nobody's coming to see you there, there's no programs. Well, there's like 2 church programs. So the judge was like, you can do your time wherever you want to in Wisconsin. I was like, okay. And then the prosecutor, he was like, okay, judge, well, could I ask that she be allowed to do work release? And the judge was irritated at this point. He was like, you're going to have to put in a petition for that, and I'll think about it. So then the hearing was concluded. So I went to jail that day, and everybody in the courtroom is crying, and I'm the one like, it's okay,
Trying to comfort everybody.
Yeah, trying to comfort them. I'm going to jail. So I go back into the jail that day, get to see like all the guards that knew me when I was a freaking complete mess. Like, I was not a nice person in 2020 when I got arrested in Wisconsin at all. So like I come in with a smile and like, I'm going to be here for a year. And they were like, what is wrong with you? You're completely different. So I sat in Polk County jail for like 3 months. And then the judge approved me to do work release. But I had to find somewhere to live in Polk County. Because they don't do, you can't like stay at the jail and then go out to work since COVID.
Yeah.
So it's like a home monitoring thing. And we had put my testimony, like I have a testimony on YouTube or a few of them or whatever, and we had put those out like within the church communities in Polk County to see if somebody would want to be my host family. So weird. I would never, like, even like thinking about it now, I'm like, what the heck? Just going to live with strangers. Anyway, so this family from New Life Church ended up taking me in, and then I worked at Cage Innovation, welding and doing assembly.
Okay.
And did that for 9 months, and then completed that. And then I accepted a position at the Adult and Teen Challenge in La Crosse as a spiritual care coordinator and taught the women's level classes. And then was the lead recovery coach as well. And then I met my husband the end of last summer. And then, we got married in January. And I said I would never, ever move to Minnesota again.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I took it as such a huge blessing that they let me leave the state to begin with.
Right.
Like, okay, well, this is a divine intervention. You know, they let me transfer my probation over to Wisconsin. I'm going to stay over there. I'm not going back to Minnesota.
Right.
But things, changed. And when you get married, like, things just change.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was okay with moving back to Minnesota. And I took a job at the Teen Challenge in Minneapolis as a recovery coach. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm the recovery coach for the women's long-term program. And I don't know what God's going to lead us to next. Trying to buy a house, and
It's amazing.
yeah.
It's a very powerful story. I mean, I just appreciate you being vulnerable as well, and sharing all of that. What would you say to someone who's still struggling or maybe going through it right now? Well, what advice would you give?
I don't know about advice. So, like, my mind is changing about how people approach recovery. And, like, I've, like, more recently, I think, so I've, like, been spending a lot of time thinking about that. And what is the biggest impact, or how do you have the biggest impact on somebody who's struggling?
Yeah.
At my other job, like, it was more authoritative, and having more of, like, a role of, like, telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful, for sure. Like, that is helpful
Sometimes.
for somebody who needs, but, like, somebody who has never had that, but they also have to, like, accept that into their life
Right.
and not, I think the best thing to do would, at least in the early stages of recovery, would be to just share your story with them.
Yeah.
And listen to them. Like, share your story, but then more listening.
Yeah.
And not a lot of talking to them. I think it's a both and type thing. So we have to be willing to, like, walk with them through the messy stuff, but they also, like, need direction. So I think, like, just getting on the same level as somebody and sharing in their sorrows and being available for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't need to say anything at all.
Yeah. Just holding that space, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just, like I said, I can't thank you enough for both of you sharing your story and coming all the way out to River Falls and meeting with me this Saturday morning. I just think you have a really powerful story, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate, and take something from it. So, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and, like, I also want to add, like, sometimes we get in this thinking that when we get sober or when we're in recovery, like, our lives are so much better and everything is perfect, or whatever you want to say. But, like Micah said, like, his relationship with his daughter is not completely restored, and it's the same situation with my kids. Like,
Yeah.
they still live with their dad. Their dad and I still don't get along, and I mean, that's just a boundary that I have. Like, him and I don't have a relationship. Like, we can't even have a conversation, and that's unfortunate because my children live with him.
Right.
And because of my decisions during my addiction and the choices that I made, like, they're in a not so healthy situation. So now, like, I mean, it's been a process. Yeah, remaining sober, not doing drugs, and trying to be the best mom that I can, but it still, like, takes time to gain back all of those years, and that's really hurtful for a mother, because, like, that becomes your identity. When you're a mom, like, your children are everything to you. So I think that was a big part that played into, like, my using was when I gave custody to their dad, like, I just didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And when he would withhold them from me or wouldn't let me see them, then it was just like, whatever, I'm just gonna go get high. So I think that's a good thing for moms to, like, think about, like, still stay sober, still keep going, and don't allow the fact that you can't see your kids or you're dealing with CPS or whatever the situation may be. Like, just keep going and don't give up. And, you know, because there's still hope in the situation. You can still be a parent to your child or a good influence, a good example, even though you're not in close proximity or they're not in your care.
It's good stuff. Yeah, I think it's easy to use those things as a reason to, I don't know, not keep moving forward. You know, it's a good.
Yeah, and they're valid, right?
Yeah.
Like, those are valid things, but something that I had to realize was I don't want to be telling my kids someday, like, that was one of the reasons I kept using drugs. Was
Right.
because I didn't get to see them. Like, yeah, that was a reason, but, like, now that doesn't make sense. And it's not going to make sense to them.
Right.
Because how a child is going to read that is, okay, so drugs were more important.
Right.
But, you know, when you're in addiction, it's hard to understand and see that. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I mean, I know we have a 12-year-old and she's seen a lot of that play out, and it's hard to, you know, explain that
yeah.
to them because she's at a place. My younger ones don't, you know. But so, well, is there anything else you want to add?
No. Anything you want to add, honey?
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, guys.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for joining us on this inspiring journey of strength and recovery. If you found this episode meaningful, please consider subscribing to The Pure Perspective to stay updated on our upcoming episodes. Your support means the world to us, and by sharing these stories, you're helping to spread hope and resilience to those who may need it most. Remember, you're not alone on your journey, and together we can make a difference. Subscribe now, and let's keep moving forward one story at a time.